Yes, friends. For the first time in a while, actually, I should say, it is OGP, the One Giant podcast, on a Friday. We haven't done these in a while because the schedule kind of dictates when we want to put our content out. And yet, as we come into you on a Friday with the Giants preparing to play on Monday Night Football, it's Adam Armbrecht, it's Andy Makowitz, and he is healthy, wealthy, and wise coming off of a relaxing, I think, Thursday evening. We're watching NFL football. There's no pressure for Sunday. We get to just enjoy the weekend, friend.
Well, I mean, Adam, listen, the last couple of days I was on dad duty. The wife had a bunch of work functions in the city on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and yesterday. So it was dad duty for a while. But you know what? Tonight, my parents have invited us up to my hometown. They're going to take us out for a little hibachi. So my 2 year old is going to experience flipping the tails of shrimp into pockets for the first time, Adam, which will be exciting.
I had a friend who one time got actually brutalized on social media because he said he's like hibachi makes me sick. And everyone was like, "What is wrong with it? What is wrong with this guy?" Like, he's an embarrassment, a disaster. And he had to clarify. He goes, "No. It's delicious. The food's phenomenal. Just something like it doesn't agree with me." And then it led into a long line of questioning around why do you keep going to hibachi? He said because it's delicious, and it really devolved from there. But that'll be exciting. I'll be very curious to see what the percentages are for young Rory. You get the shrimp toss. You might get a veggie opportunity in there somewhere. They have the little fire hose man. We all know there's a lot of entertainment value there for a young
I,
kid.
don't bury the lead. The onion volcano is really one that sells it when they throw the oil and it goes up in the air. So it's gonna be a big night for him. I'm actually more excited for him than I am for myself.
Listen, Andy and Adam's culinary delights will be launching soon. But in the meantime, let's talk about a little bit of football. And I said Thursday night, we got to see the once undefeated Arizona Cardinals taking on the Packers of Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, right? That one got interesting late. Some fun sequences that ultimately led to the Packers coming out on top there. But what were some of, because these are two of, Green Bay comes out to start the season. Whoa, no, it's all over. And then they just keep rattling off wins. And now, presumably, these are two of the better teams in the NFC that another 6, 7 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about what are the expectations for them going to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think everyone obviously mentioned that this game had a lot of intrigue, not only in terms of the playoffs, but in terms of the one seed in the NFC. Just knowing that those were two teams that are circling getting that bye. And remember, there's only one team that gets the bye in the NFC now with the new playoff structure.
Big
That
difference going, no, Arizona, because that they're talking about, it's like you don't think about it, if you're a top team or you have a good record, you feel good about it. But big difference if you're the Green Bay Packers and thinking, oh, we may have to go to Arizona at some point in the playoffs, as opposed to being Arizona and saying, we're going to have to go to Green Bay and play at Lambeau Field in cold weather. Like that is a variable, and why out of these two teams, it probably was far more important. Listen, we're approaching the midway point here, but probably far more important for the Cardinals to win that game. Like every game that the Cardinals can win to secure home field, that's important for a team that plays in perfect conditions on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, so that was huge, and to your point, the other team that's looking at potentially the one seed is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, as you point out, you're talking about two warm weather teams. The Packers get a win. Having to go to Lambeau as the last stop is not necessarily easy. Granted, Tampa Bay and Green Bay met last year in the NFC Championship game, but it's just it adds that level of intrigue. Both of the teams last night are going to be in the playoffs. They are two of the top six teams in the odds to win the Super Bowl. But Adam, for me, what I find fascinating is the Green Bay Packers are down Devontae Adams, they're down Marcus Valding Scantling, they're down Alan Lazard, so they're basically down their three top wide receivers. And people are like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen with the Packers. And you look at just what greatness looks like, and it's like it doesn't really even impact Aaron Rodgers and his ability to throw the ball down the field. And that's what some of the great quarterbacks do. I mean, we obviously give a lot of leeway on Daniel Jones when he's missing Kenny Galladay or he's missing Sterling Shepard or he's missing Kadarius Toney.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers is on the road against the undefeated number one team right now in the Arizona Cardinals. He goes in there and he's first career passes to guys off the street. He's throwing darts to them and goes to Old Faithful Randall Cobb, who hadn't had 2 touchdown games since 2015. Like Aaron Rodgers just figures it out and makes it work. And he's like one of what, 3 quarterbacks in the league that you could basically say that about. Like you look at Tom Brady, you look at Aaron Rodgers, maybe Mahomes, but the list is very narrow. Russell Wilson, maybe like that list of great quarterbacks that it almost doesn't matter who they have around them. When game time comes, you still feel like you have a shot to win.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, the one caveat I'll throw into this is Aaron Rodgers threw for a buck 84 on 22 of 37, right? Played a very clean game, and this is as much as anything about doesn't matter who you're throwing to. Well, the difference would be Devontae Adams would have gone for 120 yards on his own. He would have had 2 touchdowns on his own, and then everything else, it kind of extrapolates out from there. But when you look inside this game, just quickly, AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones, right? 78 yards, 59 yards. Inside of the receiving numbers, Aaron Jones, 7 catches for 51 yards, right? So, and this, by the way, it's not something you just do if you don't have the right quarterback inside of the system. But this is also, I think, you can add the extra caveat of the system, of the scheme, right? How do you design success when you lose multiple starting, very key, important figures to your offense? You better have a system in place. You better have a guy like Winfrey, who's a second-year receiver, but catches 4 balls for 30 yards. It's a throwaway number, but guess what? He got open for the handful of catches that you needed him for, right? Like, this is where stable organizations kind of make sure that you start to have these things in place. And then if you have a Tom Brady, if you have a Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, you get to say, all right, we're down, guys. Now we're going to lean on you a little bit more to play a smart, clean game. And that's what Aaron Rodgers did last night. And maybe, you wonder a little bit, like with a young quarterback like Kyler Murray, right? Where's the learning curve there? When does he approach this spot where you say you didn't have Hopkins for the entire game? So how are you going to manufacture success? They still I thought they did a great job, came back late. It was a good game, but there's no substitute for having been in the league for 10, 15 years, right? There's no substitute for just having seen a lot of what defenses want to do and kind of letting your instincts take over when some of these hiccups come along.
And if you don't think that coaching matters, to your point, like Aaron Rodgers had Mike McCarthy for many, many years, and they had 500 records in a couple of those years over the last few years.
Yep.
Matt LaFleur comes in. It's not like Aaron Rodgers has gotten any younger or more athletic or more spry, and all of a sudden they're winning 80% of their games together. Like coaching does matter in this league,
Yeah.
and you can you could just see it last night that LaFleur really figured that out. But it was just an interesting game, great game for a Thursday night. It's nice to have something to ease into the weekend. And Adam, the fact that the Giants play on Monday means we get a full Sunday slate of games to be able to watch. The question is more going to be who's going to be around on Monday night for the Giants.
Yeah, man, listen, and like maybe the Giants are catching that proverbial break that they don't play until Monday because you're getting some positive returns on the idea that Sterling Shepard's probably the closest out of those absentee wide receivers to being ready to go for Monday. Some positivity around Kadarius Toney. Yeah, we said last time that what happens with Saquon Barkley is going to be very much the hey, is this 1,000% sure that he's healthy? Like you're not going to get any kind of risk there with him. But it'll be interesting because you mentioned about other guys stepping up, the Carolina game. Well, that's a bad, relatively bad team, a defense that you feel like you could move the ball against. So when you have John Ross and you have Dante Pettis, you go, okay, great. Like we'll make this thing work this week. And even though the Kansas City Chiefs are not necessarily a good defense right now, you do feel like you need some of those explosive weapons and playmakers to make sure that you can go toe to toe with Mahomes in that offense. There's an element to this. I do want to address that. Like these aren't the Kansas City Chiefs from the last 2 years. That can be true, right? We saw what happened to them last week, and also it doesn't mean that they're not capable of putting together a week that looks very much like the seasons we've come to know from them.
Yeah, I mean, think of it this way. It's pretty simple. The Chiefs looked terrible last week. Did not score a touchdown against the Tennessee Titans. Did not score a touchdown with Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill out there. Like that just doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
even with not scoring a touchdown, they're still a top 5 scoring offense, touchdown percentage, scoring percentage in the league. Like
Yep.
they're still dynamic on offense. Where they really get into problems is their defense. They're a bottom 3 defense. They've looked even worse than that. They can't stop the run. They're giving up big plays. And the problem is, like, teams are electing to receive the kickoff. They go down, they put up 7. if Mahomes doesn't score, they're punting the ball away, and the team's coming down the field and scoring 14. And now Mahomes has touched the ball for 2 or 3 plays. They're
Yep.
down 14 nothing, and he's like, I got to get it all back in one throw. And you could see he's forcing it downfield. He's trying to extend plays and make plays, and that's not where Mahomes thrives. Right? He thrives on the defense is competent. I can just take the shots when they're there for me, not have to make a 10-point play on every single throw that I make.
No, 100%. And it's just that reality check of what does happen, right? When things aren't going well, when you're dealing with injuries, when your defense or a defensive unit isn't that strong in a given year, all of a sudden teams can approach playing you differently. So, this goes back to when Mahomes first came in the league. It's nothing. I think Mahomes is phenomenal. I think all these guys are. But sometimes when you see these sample sizes over 1 or 2 years and you go, boom, he's the next greatest quarterback, mark it down. He's going to break every single record, all those things. And maybe Mahomes will. But I always do err on this side of like, well, let's just wait and see what happens over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? Because and it was really just about like the legacy piece, even at that point. Did he go to a Super Bowl again? Yes. But did he win it? No. So now you're hearing this year and you go, well, what if Kansas City doesn't make it this year now? Well, what does that mean? Now you see the Chargers are coming up a little bit. Herbert looks like now these other teams are going to be more competitive. Now all of a sudden there's a more difficult road in the AFC to make it to the Super Bowl. And then it's 6, 7 years later. And Mahomes is a really good quarterback who's won one Super Bowl, right? Like these things unfold in very different ways. And ironically, talking about Thursday night, Aaron Rodgers, right? This is a guy that we all agree is one of the absolute elite quarterbacks in the history of the game. And yet now we're talking about the career winding down and wondering, boy, is he going to get a couple more bites of this apple so that he can cement the proverbial legacy?
Look at Russell Wilson, another perfect
Yeah.
example, a guy that
Yep.
that
Right there,
wins a
a
Super
fluky
Bowl.
play, right? Fluky play against New England. You go, boy, that's absolutely brutal, but he'll be back here again. Okay. And now, and look where we are, right? A handful of years later, maybe Seattle is starting to come down, and now Russell Wilson, at what you feel like is this peak little pocket of his NFL career, has to say, do I need to try to make a big move here and go somewhere else if I want to win more championships? Like the NFL, man, it comes at you fast, as they say sometimes.
Well, yeah, it's crazy because you would absolutely thought that Russell Wilson was going to get back, but it actually speaks to the greatness of Tom Brady a little bit more. I know everyone sings his virtues, but it's like over this entire career, he's made the Super Bowl how many times? He continually gets back there when we say it about other quarterbacks, they don't necessarily make it. I will have to say one thing from the Monday night Peyton and Eli telecast
Yes,
on
sir.
ESPN2. They actually had Tom Brady on, so it was Tom Brady, Peyton, and Eli. And as a Giant fan, I mean, you gotta love when Tom's talking and he looks and he's like, and you know what, Peyton, I enjoyed playing those games against you, but Eli, I did not enjoy the games. And Eli's like, Tom, I quite enjoyed playing against you. I don't know why you would feel that way about me. And
Yeah, I
as a
like those.
Giant fan, it's
Those
just
are a lot of
it's
fun
just
for me.
nice to know that like in interviews you hear Tom Brady like we all agree that he's the greatest quarterback of all time. In interviews, they're like, "What team do you want to beat, or who do you want to beat?" He's like, "The Giants. The Giants are the only
Nice.
team that I need to beat." And so it still stings Tom Brady to this day that he just could not beat Eli Manning in big spots.
Of course, and that's what you want. Just listen when you're having a couple of rough, decade or so as Giants fans, you cling to the memories that matter most. On the Giants side of things, since because we get to Monday, we'll really talk more game specific stuff and the matchups that we like, and then we'll also have a really clear picture of who's going to be available for the Giants. But Tuesday does mark the end of the trade deadline, so I just wanted to quickly. There's only a couple players now, as we know. Whatever conversations we were having about Jabril Peppers, he gets injured, so that's off the table here. But there's two players. The one obvious one, Evan Engram. We've talked about. Everyone's talking about him as being a tradable piece on this team. And then the other one that's bubbled up has been Darius Slayton. We heard this from some fans early in the season, even just saying, "Hey, this is a guy that you could move on from." I just wanted to check with you, because listen, I'm not. I've been wrong on things. Obviously, Carter Coughlin getting massive playing time this year has not come to fruition. But once upon a time, just going back to last year, you sat here and said, first round, somebody wants to give me a late first, an early second round pick for Evan Engram. Sure, I'll take it. But and by the way, when there's more years on the contract, it's certainly possible. But now as you stand here, like what is your threshold? If Team X tells you that they're going to give you a sixth round pick, is that, do you sit there and say, that's ridiculous? Or because you also highlighted this over on Twitter around the different mechanisms as far as what it means to keep a player in the last year of his contract versus moving off of him now.
Yeah, I think it's a big difference, and you hit the nail on the head for me. My big distinction on trading away Giants now is how much time do they have left on their contract. So when you're talking about a guy that is set to become a free agent, obviously that's when the Giants would consider moving him. But the way compensatory picks work, Adam, is basically they take it's this convoluted formula that admittedly the league doesn't release because they don't want teams like gamifying the system.
Yeah.
But basically, it takes into how much money does the person sign for? So, what's their average annual yearly salary?
Mhm.
What was their snap count? How many percentage of snaps did they play for their team previously? And also, what postseason awards did they win that are walking out the door?
Right.
Now, that's why it would have actually been a little bit nicer for the Giants had Evan Ingram been a free agent at the end of last season, knowing that he did play a bunch of the snaps. He was making $7 or $8 million, and he ended up being a Pro Bowler. So
Right.
those things would have netted the Giants. And just for everyone's edification here, the compensatory picks are anywhere between a third and a seventh round pick based on how many of those contracts you have going out and how many you have coming in.
Right.
So on someone like Evan Ingram, the question is if you hold on to him and he signs somewhere on a 2 year, I don't know, $10 million deal as a free agent, someone says, hey, he's only 25, 26 years old. He's athletic. Maybe
He'll be
we,
28
we
years old, but yeah.
28 years old. Maybe we think about a different way that we can utilize him. Maybe he's a little bit more of a slot receiver. Maybe he plays a different type of tight end position. Then the
Right.
Giants may get a 6th round pick in 2 years. So for me, the idea is like, is a 6th round pick next year worth that much more than a 6th round pick in 2 years? Do you want to free up Caden Smith to be able to get a couple more reps? Like, what is the reason why we're moving him? Is it just not
Mhm.
working? So for me, it'd have to be more than a 6th round pick if that's potentially what you're going to get in compensatory for him if you let him walk out the door anyway. So, I think it's easy for me to say if we could get a 4th round pick for Evan Ingram, he would be moved on. If it's a 5th round pick, maybe, I guess. If it's a 6th, I don't know if you really get what you need in terms of trading him, knowing that you'll probably get something on the back end anyway.
Yeah, I think yeah, and what I like there, what I appreciate from Andy on that one is the acknowledgement of like this guy's not going out into the market and signing some massive deal in the offseason where then all of a sudden you start factoring in this big contract, right? Like all those things. And to your point, this isn't a guy who's played a lot of reps this year. He only has 22 catches, I think, this season, right? So none of the numbers are driving it in a positive direction from the compensatory system standpoint. But as I get the cell phone out of the way there, but the other thing for me is what teams are looking to trade for them, and I'll tie it into as we talk about Darius Slayton a little bit here. The last factor to me is the health of this team right now, right? So we just listed all these wide receivers. If you like Caden Smith, and by all intents and purposes, I think if you liked him enough, you would have seen them utilize him more this year because it's not like Evan Ingram has been lighting the world on fire. So you probably sit there and say, well, we have some injuries. When is Golladay coming back? Is Tony going to be 100% healthy? Sterling Shepard, all these pieces, and you do still take a step back and say, I'm not telling you that Evan Ingram is going to be the saving grace of our season, and yet I do know that I'm diminishing something if I take him off the field, whatever his value may be. So that's where you sit there and say, maybe it's worth it just to play that string out, right? Now, the interesting thing is a couple of the teams that were mentioned that would be looking for wide receiver help were the New Orleans Saints and the Detroit Lions. And the reason why I bring this up is just quickly on Ingram. Well, if you tell me if it's a 5th round pick from the Detroit Lions for an Evan Ingram, well, that's going to be up at the top of the draft, right? Of that round, as opposed to a 5th round pick for the Saints. That's going to be maybe closer to the back end or middle, depending on how the rest of their season goes. So that's obviously a big factor too when you think about those compensatory picks being they get tagged on to the end of the round. So a 6th rounder in next year's draft from the right team that's going to be, say, top 10 in the 6th round versus compensatory. Well, at best, that's going to be 34th, 35th, 36th in the 6th round in that given year. So you are talking about 20 to 30 selections later in whatever round. I think that's important to remember. Where do you think Darius Slayton, a 5th round pick by the New York Football Giants, how much has he moved his value? Because we all agree that he's outperformed his draft stock, right? He's played far better than a 5th round pick. So if there are teams like the Saints and the Lions that are in the mix here, where's your threshold on a Darius Slayton? This isn't about what would you trade him for, because I have my opinion on the player as an individual, but where would you, do you think that that Darius Slayton can garner then what? He's a fifth round pick, a relatively early fifth round pick. So what is that? Is he a late third round value now? Early fourth round value? How much has that needle moved on a player like that over the first few years of his career?
Well, so Darius Slayton is clearly on the open market much more valuable than Evan Engram is, and
Yeah.
it's a couple. I mean, it's a couple things, and I don't think I'm going to be telling Giant fans anything that's earth shattering. But number one is he's younger, right? So he's 24 years old. Number two, he's in his third year, not his fourth year of his rookie contract, and that is actually the most important piece of it because any team that's looking to make a postseason run this year and needs wide receiver help. You just mentioned the New Orleans Saints as a potential fit. That marriage would be perfect considering they need somebody on the outside. They can utilize him during this stretch run, and they also get him next year to be able to bolster the team as they go for multiple playoff runs. So for me, Darius Slayton showed in his last game against Carolina, he got 5 balls. He looked pretty good, 63 yards. It's tough to move on from a guy that you really like. And to me, yeah, I think Darius Slayton has clearly outperformed a fifth round designation.
Yeah.
If that's all you are getting in the open market for Darius Slayton, I don't think you make that move. It doesn't seem to make sense. You like hit on a fifth round wide receiver and then you flip him for another fifth rounder. It's like you hope that a fifth round wide receiver ends up being Darius Slayton, and now you're trading him away for another fifth one. It would just essentially be resetting the clock. So for me, yeah, I wonder how much someone would give up. I think you mentioned a third round pick. That's probably the lowest that you'd want to go for someone that it has been as productive and is now on his rookie deal coming into his own like Slayton is.
Yeah, I wonder, and that's what I mean. Like, it's like when you say third round, like, ooh, boy, like that's considered a very valuable draft asset. But wide receivers are a sought after commodity. And the interesting thing to me would be when you think about looking out over this landscape. So the number is right because he's not making a lot of money right now, still a controllable player as well. So, it's like theoretically, if you were a team that suffers some injury, let's say Green Bay Packers, even, right? Like, well, you got some guys go down. Let's say one of them ends up being a little bit more serious than you realize. Well, all of a sudden you could inject a player like Darius Slayton, be the mid to deep part of the field, give some target opportunities, obviously from Aaron Rodgers. Like, hey, what is that worth to go win that playoff game, extra playoff game now? Go try to win a championship now. But what I find interesting is like a guy like Brendan Cooks, who is obviously been far more productive player. Right now, he's a little bit older, obviously, but I do think that the interesting thing becomes if you are a team now, if you're the Detroit Lions, I think Darius Slayton makes a lot of sense, right? Controllable. You're a rebuilding team. You're looking to rebuild your wide receiver nucleus there, right? You drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown. You had Williams, who went down with injuries early in this year too. So then you have Hawkinson there at the tight end position. So that makes sense. But if you're a team that's competing for a championship this year, that's where I think you go, well, where's our cap space at? Can we go afford to get what is just an electric, proven, explosive, dynamic receiver that could really, he could blow the top off of something for you, right? Darius Slayton theoretically can, but it's not like, for as much as we like him, it's not like he's known around the league as being watch out for Darius Slayton, right? He's a third wide receiver on the roster. Like, there's plenty of guys. You talk about Hardman, you talk about some of these other lower level players that are like, whoa, watch out for this explosive dynamic, whatever. Like, that's not Darius Slayton, at least at this point of his career. So I do wonder about what the other market around the league is going to be and how teams look at that. Who knows? Maybe even the Cardinals are a team that get on that radar as deep as they are at wide receiver. It looks like Hopkins is going to be nursing some injuries for himself as well. So that's the thing that kind of gets rattled around in my head of what else is going to be out there, what other teams are going to be willing to put a player on the table.
Well, keep in mind with a guy like Brandon Cooks, to your point, yes, far more accomplished in this league than Darius Slayton has been, and would be the type of addition a contender would want. He's making a pretty decent amount
Yeah.
of money this year, but he also has a $15 million cap hit next year, and like there's only 10 to 12 wide receivers in the league that have a $15 million cap hit. So you need to be a team that can absorb a cap hit like that for that type of player. And there's not that many contenders that have just a bunch of cash lying around, or else they would have spent it. So that's why a guy like Slayton does become intriguing, because he is on his rookie deal. He is young. You do get 2 years, similar to Brandon Cooks. So it's like the talent versus the cap and what you could do with the money. Wonder how appealing each of them are based on that, right?
So then, okay, so then let's cap off the because I think Slayton is this young player, we like him, but let's cap it off with saying what would you do? What would you take? Like, first of all, would you just keep him? You like him, you want him on this team, you have him for 2 more years, you think he's a part of the future nucleus for the Giants with Kadarius Toney, or if you're willing to trade him, where do you draw that line? Does it have to be a third round pick from a contending team, which would be at the back end of it? Could a high fourth round from the Detroit Lions, would that be enticing enough for you?
Well, it's not just about Darius Slayton in a vacuum, too, Adam. I think that's the easy thing to ask, is like, this for this, like for like, would you take a fourth rounder for Slayton? I probably wouldn't, knowing that we have him under control cheaply for next year as well. But think about it. John Ross is on a 1 year deal. He's had flashes, but if he starts playing better on the open market, he's going to get more money to go somewhere else. You look at Dante Pettis, has been a little bit of a retread from different places. He's played a little bit, but he hasn't really shown the flashes that he did early when he came over to the Giants last year, especially in that Baltimore Ravens game. You look at Sterling Shepard. How long is he going to be a Giant? Obviously, the Giants like him and they want him around. So really the question is, like, you have Kenny Galladay that you just signed to this big deal. You just drafted Kadarius Toney. How does this wide receiving room end up taking shape? Because
Yeah.
very easily you trade Darius Slayton, John Ross isn't here, Dante Pettis isn't here, and now all of a sudden the room looks a little bit different.
And Evan Engram isn't here, right? Like,
Right.
however you label these guys, all of a sudden you need to bring in at least, you think, two more weapons into that receiving tight end group in order to be ready for next year. And that's the good point. That's why I think it does seem odd to push that button on him, even if and again, there could be an offer that would really move the needle for you. You say, okay, great. It's hard to pass up, and we feel like we can go back into the draft and find someone in the third, fourth, fifth round to replace Darius Slayton. But as it stands right now, I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of what he, and now with Kadarius Toney, like what this offense could look like with him, and obviously with Daniel Jones. So we'll keep an eye on that. The last interesting thing, you threw it out there on social media about if the Giants were to upset the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday. I think they're 9.5 point dogs as we stand here today. Would that change the narrative for the season? Would it change the perspective? My knee jerk thing was just, again, if this was Kansas City of the Super Bowl year, well, maybe. Kansas City from last year, maybe. It's not unlike the Carolina Panthers game, just from the perspective of, remember, this team was 3-0. Yep, but now they're 3-3. The record is what it is. They're a 500 club. If you should be able to beat them, that's the deal. Kansas City is a whole different animal, but also, what their record is. You can only go by what you see on tape. So that's where they stand. I want to give my take on it, but if the Giants, because without getting into any specifics about our Monday show, but like, would that do it for you? The Giants beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and you go, okay, like this season is taking on a whole different mentality now after back-to-back wins.
I think for me, listen, towards the end of last year and even the year before that, we were so concerned with whether or not we were going to pick ninth or 10th, where we were going to end up. Oh my goodness, we won a meaningless game at the end of the year. We missed out on Chase Young. How can you believe it? Like, now Chase Young looked great. His rookie year looks a little different right now. It's like everyone it fixates on like getting a higher draft pick. I want to see
Sure.
this team grow. I want to see Daniel Jones win games. This would be a huge confidence boost to Daniel Jones if he could go into Arrowhead in one of the most difficult environments to go win a football game in and go toe to toe with Mahomes. Like, how could you not be encouraged as a Giants fan? I think the amount of goodwill, cachet that you get from a win like that is worth more than maybe moving down one spot in the draft and having so many different question marks about all the different players in the direction that the Giants need to go in the future. So for me, let's just win the game that's in front of us. Let's hope that Daniel Jones shows that he's a competent quarterback, can put up points with a guy like Patrick Mahomes and give the Giants a chance. And then who knows, if the Giants start looking good and people are starting to get healthy, who knows what could happen, right? Like, are we
Oh,
are we
yeah.
100% convinced that the Giants couldn't beat the Eagles? They couldn't beat the Dolphins. They're not going to beat the Bears. Like, there's a lot of games still on the schedule that who knows? But let's start seeing progress as an organization.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. Yeah, and I'm not. This isn't about like, oh, would you rather be higher in the draft? No, like we always talked about, right? Like I want the Giants to win as many games as they can every single year. That's all that I care about. And then when you get to the draft, you look at the board and you see what happens. Like that's just the way that it goes. I'm not taking this any other direction than I want my team to win games. But I would say because you mentioned it's like you get Philly twice, you'll get Washington, you'll get the Dolphins, right? You'll get the Bears. There's 5 games right now and you could say, well, those are all winnable games. That's 7 wins for the Giants, right? But if you beat the Chiefs, I think it obviously reaches this middle ground of being like, well, that's more impressive than beating, say, the Eagles, right? That's more impressive than beating the Dolphins this year. Okay. However, these next 3 games, Chiefs, Raiders, Bucks, the only way that it changes the perspective on the season is if you have to somehow find a way to win. To me, it's the Raiders and the Bucks because those are 2 teams that are playing really well right now. So it's like the same thing coming out of this Carolina game. Don't get too sucked into it. Really enjoy what happened. Enjoy that you got the win, that the defense played well, all those things. Okay. And also realize who you were playing, who the quarterback was, who the weapons are they didn't have, and take that into account because this is really like the end of the season perspective of going, you get to 7-10, you could get to 8-9. But if 5 of those wins are against all those crap teams we talk about, and then maybe you caught somebody who's dealing with a quarterback injury or something, I don't want it to be the rose-colored lenses that we look through this season and say, oh, that's the improvement that we wanted, because you'll go back and you'll look at the wins and losses, and what you'll realize is, oh, so we're a team that beat all of the bad teams in the league and then got blown out by or could not hang with some of the better teams. So to your point, the Chiefs, you can lose this game, but if you play a good game, it's still a positive. It's not even about the wins and losses in a lot of ways. It's about, do you look like you're a team that can compete with some of the better teams in the league? The Bucks, the Raiders, the Chargers, the Cowboys the next time, right? Like those are the games you want to see how they play in. And I'd argue by the end of the year, you could have 6 wins or 7 wins, but if a couple of them were against some of these better teams, you'd at least say, okay, there's things we need to figure out, injuries, all this other nonsense. But hey, we won some games against some good ball clubs that needed those wins and those points of the season, right? So it's interesting. And it's funny how this has been a very rocky handful of weeks for the Giants. And yet you do find yourself in this circumstance where they could end up being 3-7 in 3 weeks, right? Say they get 1 win and you'll still be looking at it and going, some games out there we could win, right? And it's just weird, man. It just feels weird to still be doing that dance.
I think you are setting the scene right. Is this Giants team good enough to beat a bottom 5 team in the league? Sure. Like we are. We've shown that we can
Yes,
beat teams like that when we need to. Now, the Saints, maybe they're going to be a playoff team, maybe not. I don't know. They're kind of like a mixed bag right now. Like
exactly.
they could fall off the way Carolina did, or they could continue to roll the way that the Raiders are. But I think, to your point, is it progress if we beat the Eagles twice and we beat the Washington football team and we beat the Bears with Justin Fields looking lost? Like, yeah, it'd be great to have 6 wins, but what does that really tell us? Like, are we moving in the right direction? It would be great to start putting some notches on the belt against perennial playoff teams. Like, maybe
Yeah.
the Saints will make it, but if they don't, we're looking at the schedule like you gotta get one of those games against a team that's like, they're competitive, they're going places, they're trying to win, they're in the playoff hunt. We can compete with those teams. And to your point, half-point underdog at Arrowhead against the Kansas City Chiefs, who were in the Super Bowl last year, playing a competitive game, giving yourself a chance to win, not necessarily having to win, but putting yourself in a position to win, is all that you can ask for this game, so that we can say we're just a couple of plays away from being a competitive playoff team, not, oh, we can beat the bottom 5 teams in the league.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, listen, that's where we're at. And listen, as we get through this game against Kansas City and during the week next week, we're going to talk a little bit kind of about that mentality of what were the Giants selling us coming in versus what you maybe look at behind the scenes of moves that got made and maybe how that rebuild process is actually occurring, even if we're being sold something else to our faces. So there's a lot. Listen, there's going to be a lot of good games over the weekend. Sunday will be a fun one. I'm trying to take a look just real quick. Yeah, maybe the Steelers Browns will be a fun one. Gonna get God, there's a lot of bad games this weekend. I apologize. I was trying to sell everybody something really good here. Yeah, watch the Eagles and the Lions. That'll be fun. Maybe watch the Rams and the Texans. Good Lord. The Bengals against the Jets. Hey, guys, maybe go out. And if you're a New York football Giants fan, enjoy Sunday. It's an apple picking season. Maybe bake a pie. There's a lot of different activities. The foliage, turning colors. Just enjoy yourself with the family.
It's also Halloween, in case anyone wanted to go do anything other than sit in front of the couch and watch football. But as terrible as the matchups might be, it's like pizza. It's good either way. Like, you're still gonna sit down and watch some of these
Oh, it's
games. Be on the watch of the Dallas Cowboys versus Minnesota Vikings game. I think that one's gonna be interesting because Minnesota's like kind of a bad good team or a really good bad team. Like, I don't know how to describe it. We don't know if Dak is going to play. Cowboys could dump a game. Like, just a lot of intrigue, especially inside the division in that one.
And whether it's Darius Slayton, whether it's Evan Engram, whether it's around the league, keeping an eye on who wins or loses could dictate who's making phone calls on Monday and whether or not they're asking to purchase or possibly offload some of the talent on their roster. So this is an exciting weekend from that NFL standpoint. We'll be back in bright and early Monday morning. We'll talk about the matchups that we like or are potentially concerned about in the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Makowitz will be running around with baby Rory, just kicking it on Halloween Sunday for sure. I bet we'll get a tale or two come Monday morning. And until then, friends, as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and demand, you, the New York Football Giants fans, know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.